In this video, we play 2-5 cash at the Wynn. We end up playing a 4K plus pot against Rampage with pocket aces.
Aces again against me.
Watch to see how the hand plays out. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We're trying to get to 10K subscribers. Let's go. In the first hand of the night, we raise under the gun to $20 with pocket sevens. The hijack and the small blind make the call. The flop comes ace 10-3 with 2 hearts. Being out of position with multiple players in this hand, we are just going to check. It checks through. With about $60 in the pot, we are quite happy as the turn is a 7 of diamonds. We see the only card we really wanted to see and turn a set. The small blind checks, and with the flush draw and straight draws out there, we are going to want to bet. We bet $40 and the hijack actually raises to 105. This raise does not make a whole lot of sense and we hope our opponent will just blast off on the river. We call. The river comes the 10 of clubs. We now obviously have a boat and we check. Our opponent thinks it over for a while and to our disappointment checks back. We show the winner and our opponent will later tell us he had ace king. This doesn't make much sense. I can get behind maybe sometimes not 3-betting pre because people like to do that, but not betting the flop seems quite crazy. In the next hand, we have queen jack of clubs. The low jack raises to $20 and we are on the button. We can sometimes 3-bet, sometimes just call. I decided to just call here. The big blind also calls. The flop comes ace king 10. We flop the absolute nuts with the backdoor club draw as well. The low jack bets $20 and we are not going to slow play this. They can have a lot of hands that connect with this board like ace king, ace queen, ace jack. So we are going to raise to $100. Our opponent makes a call. The turn is the 8 of spades. There's about $300 in the pot, maybe a bit less, and when our opponent checks to us, we bet $300. Back to our opponent, who ends up jamming all in for about $900 total. Obviously, we snap call, and it becomes pretty apparent we have the same hand. Our opponent shows queen jack of diamonds. What could have been quite nice becomes quite underwhelming as we chop this one up. What is not so underwhelming is this next hand, where we have ace 8 of spades, and we see a back raise for $80. The under the gun player limped for $5. We raised to $25 under the gun won. The small blind called, and this guy under the gun decided to back raise. Being that this is a pretty small limp re-raise and we have a suited ace, we are going to make the call. The small blind also makes the call and we are going 3 ways. We did not write down what the flop was for this hand, but we know we flopped a flush draw. It was something like queen 10 deuce with 2 spades. There's about 160 in the pot and the limp raiser makes it 150. We make the call and the small blind folds. Once again, we do not know what the turn was, but we know it was a spade. We'll say it's the 5 of spades. We turn the nuts and the opponent checks. Don't want to bet too big to scare our opponent away, don't want to bet too small. We decide on a bet sizing of 225. Our opponent makes the call. The river is meaningless, let's say the 3 of diamonds. Our opponent checks. Starting this hand 1K effective, we really only have one move here.
All in.
We go all in for somewhere around pot for $700 or $800. Our opponent thinks about it for a long time, but eventually folds. They will later tell us they had aces and accidentally limped under the gun. In the next hand, we are finally at Rampage Poker or Ethan's table. Naturally, there is a $10 mandatory straddle at this table. We sit down with about $1,500. In the first hand, the cutoff raises to $35. We 3-bet from the small blind to 130, and Ethan in the big blind cold calls. The cutoff also calls. The flop comes queen 10-4. Overall, this is a pretty great flop for us, and I think we want to just bet. We bet 150 into about 400. Surprisingly enough, Ethan calls in the big blind and the cutoff also calls. The pot is already at $850 and the turn comes the deuce of spades. In general, maybe we should just be checking here with multiple people calling our flop bet behind us, but I was under the impression this was a pretty loose table, and with top pair, I think we are just going to continue betting. We bet 375. This time, Ethan in the big blind folds and the cutoff calls. The pot is now almost $1,600, and the river comes the ace of spades. We now improve to top 2, however, king jack does get there. We decide to play cautiously and check. Our opponent checks back rather quickly, we show our hand and are good. Our opponent will later tell us he had pocket kings. Interesting decision for him not to 4-bet pre, as Rampage Poker called the big blind and there was extra dead money in the pot. In retrospect, we could have definitely made a bit more money if we went for a small block sizing, but we could have also maybe gotten raised and put in a terrible spot, so it's whatever. The next hand is the one you have all been waiting for. We have pocket aces, and with the $10 straddle on, we raised to $35 from the cutoff. Rampage Poker 3-bets us to 125 from the button. If this spot isn't dreamy enough, the big blind 4-bets to 330. It folds back around to us, and the big blind is only playing about 1k. We have managed to chip up to about $2,200, and Rampage Poker covers everyone. 5-betting here would just look ungodly strong. If the big blind had a lot more chips, I would definitely 5-bet, but being that he was only 1k effective, we decided to just call. As expected, this also invites Rampage to make the call. We are now 3 ways where the pot is almost 1k already, and the flop comes 8-6 deuce rainbow. The big blind 4-better checks, and it's on us. All things considered, this is a pretty great flop, as we are really only worried about pocket 8s and pocket 6s that Ethan could possibly have. We decide to check for a little bit of pot control and deception, and Rampage Poker ends up betting 275. The big blind does not know what he got himself into, and quickly folds. When it comes back to us, we need to decide whether to call or raise. While he can have the previously mentioned hands, I think he can also have 9s plus, aka smaller overpairs. For this reason, we decide to raise to 600. Rampage thinks it over for a while and eventually makes a call. We either have him right where we want him, or he is about to stack us. The turn is the 4 of clubs. There is now about $2,200 in this pot. We take some time to balance the live reads and eventually go all in for about $1,100.
All in.
Rampage insta calls, and I don't know what to think.
You got a set?
The river is safe, the 5 of clubs, and we show our hand. We are good! Rampage shows pocket kings.
Aces again against me.
I know.
If you are a longtime viewer of the channel, you might remember the last time we played with Rampage where we doubled up with pocket aces against him as well.
Where's your thumbnail?
This time the pot was for significantly more, and it was a cooler. I really think Rampage hates me at this point, but that is poker. Until next time, Ethan. And only a couple hands later, you wouldn't believe it, but we pick up pocket aces again. This time we are in the big blind, and there are several $10 limps, and we raise to $65. 2 early position players make the call. The flop comes queen, jack, 5. One of the early position players to Rampage's direct left is a whale. He's got a huge stack, and he's playing basically every hand. For this reason, we know he is going to bet when we check, so we decide to start with a check. Right on cue, the whale bets 120. And the early position player to his left actually calls as well. While a bit scary because we are so deep with the whale, it is time to put in a check raise. We raise to $400. A bit to our relief, the whale folds, and actually the early position player calls. We are about 1500 effective with this player, and the turn is the 9 of spades. King 10 gets there as well as some random 2 pairs, so we're going to actually just check here for pot control. Besides, this does not seem like a hand we can go 3 streets with. Our opponent checks back. The river is the 3 of hearts. Luckily, this changes nothing. When our opponent checks back the turn, he most likely has something like top pair. For this reason, we go for value and bet 450. Our opponent eventually makes the call, and we show our hand and are good.
Okay.
Gotta love picking up another huge pot with aces and these priceless reactions we get to hear. Next up, we have pocket 9s in the big blind, and there is a shadow on for $10. There is an early position limp, and the cutoff raises to $40. We 3-bet to 150, and the cutoff calls. The flop comes ace 10 10. This is not that bad of a board for our hand, but we really don't want to bet and then not know what to do on the turn, so we are going to start with a check. Our opponent checks back. The turn is the deuce of clubs. We check once again, and this time our opponent bets $90 into about 320. While they can certainly still have an ace that they check back on the flop for pot control, they are also going to have some bluffs here. Hands like 9-8, king queen, king jack, clubs, a lot of hands that are obviously not going to win at showdown and need to start bluffing. Besides, pocket 9s on this board is still not too bad. We make the call, and the river comes the 6 of hearts. We check, and this time our opponent bets $400 into about 500. We obviously have a bluff catcher at this point. It's nice not to see a club on the river, and it's also nice that we don't have a club ourselves, as they can be bluffing those. With that said, this is not an easy decision.
Oh, what do you want me to do here? Want me to call or fold? I should probably fold.
After some anguish, we decide to put our hero cape on and make the call. Our opponent taps the table, tells us we are good, and eventually shows king queen off. This guy had a huge stack and was a pro, so I didn't feel too guilty making him show. I know some of you have a problem with that sometimes, but some of you also want to see them show their hands so we can know what they have. It's a slippery slope. In the final hand of the night, we get a little wild as we play 8-3 off. Just kidding, it's a bomb pot, and there are 9 players, $20 each, $180 in the pot before we even see a flop. Oh, and this is a double board bomb pot, not just a single board. The first flop is ace, jack, deuce, and the second flop is 8-3 deuce. We flop top 2 on the second board. Unfortunately, we are in a pretty terrible spot as we start by checking in the small blind. It checks around to the cutoff, who bets 150. We just decide to make the call, and the middle position player makes the call as well. The turn on the first board is the jack of hearts, and the turn on the second board is the king of hearts. It checks around to the cutoff, who once again bets, this time $300. This is about half pot. This is really not a great spot. Our hand could be beat on both boards. And if it's not beat now, it could definitely be beat by the river, as it's pretty hard for our hand to improve. For these reasons, I can actually get behind folding here, but we do decide to make the call. The middle position player also makes the call. The pot has now ballooned to over $1,500, and the river on the first board is the 10 of clubs, and on the second board it is the ace of hearts. We check, and this time the middle position player goes all in, but it's only for 175. They were pretty short. The cutoff calls, and for this price, obviously we cannot fold, even though we really aren't loving life.
What the fuck? I probably lose. Oh god. Oh no! God damn it.
All of the hands are tabled, and the middle position player has a jack for the win on the top board, and the cutoff actually has the same hand as us, 8-3 off. We have been quartered in a bomb pot. While it sucks, at least we got a bit back to end the night.
Alright guys, we are leaving the Wynn wild session. Randomly found Ethan, Rampage Poker, at Wynn 2-5 and finally got to his table and just so happened to double up off him with aces when he had kings. I know he probably really just is getting tired of me doubling versus him when I have aces, so I feel kind of bad, but you know, it is what it is. We were in for 1,000 and cashed out for 56.40. That is a $4,600 profit for the night. Pretty sick. 2 big hands with aces, and that was really what it was from. Pretty good night. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Let's go.